You have your water here. Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you for joining us. It is evening here in London, and my name is Louisa Uliette, and I'm curator of talks and events at the Photographers Gallery. We're delighted to be here tonight with Poulomi Basu, one of this year's nominees for the Deutsche Börse Photography Foundation Prize. Shortlisted for publication Centralia, Poulomi is an artist and activist. Today she is joined with broadcaster Bidisha, and together they will talk through her use of photography, moving image, and installation to combine fact and fiction to reveal the injustices, sorry, I said that a bit weird, the injustices that continue to exist today. They will also discuss Poulomi's influences and how activism and history impact Poulomi's work. Bidisha is a broadcaster, journalist, and artist working in moving and still image. Most recent works include the publication of an essay entitled The Future of Serious Art and a film series entitled Aurora, both of which were released last year, with the series being ongoing. Bidisha specializes in subjects around international human rights, social justice, and arts and culture, and we're so glad that she's with us today. After their discussion, we will move to questions and comments from you. The event should last roughly 1 hour. Please note we are recording this, so if you do not wish to be featured, please turn off your camera. There will be time at the end for questions and comments from you, and you can input using either the chat feature here or using the Zoom function that allows you to raise your hand, and we will then unmute you to speak. We are approaching this event in the same way we do all of our public programs, which is with the aim of creating a forum of trust and mutual respect, so please keep that in mind. I really hope that today's discussion inspires you, and we look forward to seeing you again here during some of our other planned online activity, and even more hopefully in the gallery again soon, which is open now with the Deutsche Börse Photography Prize, as well as the picture library. So please keep checking our website for more information. And thank you again for joining us. And now to Poulomi Basu and Bidisha.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Thanks to the Photographers Gallery, and welcome everyone. Above all, welcome Poulomi. Thank you for taking this time, and congratulations as you're positioning as a finalist for the Deutsche Börse Photography Foundation Prize 2021. In fact, we're in front of the beautiful colored walls of your exhibition, which is centered around your project, which is called Centralia. I'm going to hold this up. I hope that the delicacy and subtlety of this cover image of two women fleeing in ambiguous circumstances, I hope that's very clear to you. We are going to have about 45 minutes to talk amongst ourselves, and then 15 minutes from the end, we are going to open it up to the floor. Your questions, your comments, please do keep them brief, and please do frame them as questions. They will be coming to me on my phone. I'm not playing with my phone while talking to Poulomi. I'm just looking for the best questions that illuminate her practice. Without further ado, Centralia is an internationally prize-winning and prize-nominated book project, and it talks about the conflict between the Indian state and indigenous tribal people. What drew you to this conflict as an artist?
So Centralia actually kind of started for me at a very personal level, because I grew up in College Street in Kolkata, which was sort of the epicenter of the Naxalite violence that started in the 1969-70. And I mean, it started in Bengal, in my state, in Naxalbari, and then it was, I mean, the epicenter of the violence was literally outside my house, and the streets outside my house were burning. you know. So, and my father and his friends were all very much involved in the movement that time. And I just found, like much later, many years after, like my dad died, I found a box with sort of photographs that showed the burning streets outside my house, like literally outside my house, and documents and stuff, you know, where my father had been arrested and his friends who had been arrested were very much part of this movement. But it's something that is not spoken of and is completely buried in history amongst that generation. So I was very interested in it, but also at the same time how it became a militarized movement and a movement of environmental justice in central India, and an indigenous movement at the same time, where role of women were very much at the central of it. I found it fascinating of how this sort of communism changed from Bengal to, say, central India, and the meaning of it, and how it got lined up with, say, other movements of environmental justice and climate change. And I was really interested in sort of diving into the heart of my country and seeing, wow, what India is this, and how it's threatening the very democracy of what India stands to be today.
You pulled together so many of the threads that surround this project and the book around Centralia. How do you see yourself as an interloper, as an artist, as a documentarian, as a freedom fighter when you're entering this environment?
I would definitely say, like, definitely as an interloper, although I am very much, I am Indian, but I am an outsider, and definitely I'm an interloper because I'm definitely not wanted in some of these spaces by people who are in positions of power. And I think that holds true for all my work, not just Centralia. I'm someone who is very anti-establishment, and as we know, abuse of power comes as no surprise. And those are the people who would consider me an interloper into, you know, many of those spaces. And yes, so I'm very much an interloper, but I'm also, I think, to an extent, as you mentioned, an expressionistic thinker, because I do question different notions of truth in my practice and how they sort of intersect and or diverge. You know, I like to put my audience to interrogate those notions, you know, and I just so happens I use photography as a tool to do those things, you know. So
I'm going to push back a little, because I really want to reclaim you as an artist and not just some sort of photojournalist or activist. I feel that you occupy all these different identities equally, but just focusing on the issue for a moment. The struggles of indigenous and tribal peoples in India has been a very long-running one, as you say in your text, but under-recognized. Now, why is that?
There are lots of different factors, but specifically speaking about in Centralia, about central India, I think part of it is also the inaccessibility to some of these places where I've been working, because they're deep in the forests and there's not much reporting going on into these places. You have to properly like go and embed yourself in these places, and there's not that much of great funding, say, within journalism and within certain medias that have those sort of long form, you know, journalism coming out of these places. So I feel part of it is that, second of it is the state sort of pushing back, buying media, censoring it, controlling it, because we have a very much a fascist country, and, you know, a lot of it is that the poor is often the dispossessed and are very disposable, and, you know, so their narratives have never been on the forefront of anything. And especially with Centralia, I feel like it's, for me, what was exciting and interesting for me was the greater neglect of women's roles in these sort of amongst indigenous Adivasi Dalit movements, you know, and the greater neglect of their voices. So it was very interesting for me to sort of bring those voices out, and, you know, again, and I think part of what I do as a part of my practice is actually go and talk and sort of show underreported stories, you know, and or make work, align myself with in spaces where issues are underreported. So, you know, yeah.
You talked about the difficulty of people embedding themselves within these conflicts, so to adequately report upon them. My obvious question is, how did you manage to do it? I could imagine if you went to someone who was just helping out, but to do it with a camera, to do it with a viewpoint as an artist, what does it take to achieve acceptance so that you arrive at your images?
Well, I think part of it is just time and patience, you know. I think it needs a lot of patience. and continuously to establish a sort of a trust and a bond and a relationship with the community, no matter how much time it takes. And one of the reasons I felt like news journalism could never do that very well is because people just don't have that time and investment to sort of build those relationships as photographers, with communities over a long sustained period of time, or there's not much investment in those kinds of photography, but where you build those relationships over a long period of time. So for me, it was very clear right from the beginning that this is going to be a long journey, and I was willing to take that long journey, but also there are these relationships you make with people along the way, and it's something that's continuing, that's growing, and this by no means is an end to the work, For me, I mean, all of these, all of the pictures and the work has come through, a lot of engagement with people in those places and relationships, In some cases they were fleeting, in some cases they were more long form, but yes, I mean, it comes, all great work, all good bodies of work come from a great place of trust and patience and good community relationships.
Did you ever encounter pushback? Did you ever encounter people saying, no, you will not make us your book, your exhibition, your project?
Not really, actually, because all along the way, I didn't know, I mean, at any point it's going to be a big exhibition. I didn't even know it's going to be I wanted to make it into a book, but I didn't know how or why. I mean, how I'll be able to even fund it and do it. It's a miracle. And I feel very blessed that it is a book and it is on the walls today. And, it's just a tragedy that the people I could have flown in, otherwise some of my friends and collaborators cannot be here today because of the pandemic and the red listing. But yeah, I mean, this has been an unexpected journey, but hey, how amazing it is to sort of have been through and live with such a remarkable group of people, and to be able to, privileged to be able to tell their stories to the world, stories that matter.
I do want to say that if you're in London, you can book to see Centralia, the exhibition. Each of these walls has been painted a different, rich, immersive color, but of course, this is also a book project. So the copies are now rare because they've been so successful at selling out. So pay for them, find them and enjoy it. I want to talk about Centralia, the book, for a moment, because this is not just a catalogue of your images. It's also a text about truth and reality and the manipulability of those things. How have you engaged with these issues? Because of course you don't just use imagery, you also use text and narrative devices.
So the text actually does play a very important role in my book, because just like the photography, just like the way the photos use a multiplicity of voices in the book, as you see different voices coming through, which is my voice, the journalist voice, the tribal, the indigenous Adivasi human rights citizen journalist voice, the Maoist voice, the guerrilla's voice. Same way text also does that. It kind of reveals, questions, adds context, and memorializes and illuminates the story, throughout the work. So, yeah.
You also talk about the manipulation of the truth. I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that, because you make us question these so-called official reports. We hear about deaths, murders, attacks, so that by the end, you're not sure who to believe.
Yeah, so I have a very interesting history, and I've always found this whole idea of holding truth to power, as much as it's true to some extent, it's also, there is a certain level of veracity with truth. And I've seen how when you're really working on ground, there are different versions of truth, different people who have positions of power, their version of truth becomes more important than, say, an Adivasi person's version of truth. So for example, I was investigating the story of Makdam Hidme, who was brutally raped, her body was covered in plastic and was found naked. And the police said, when it was found naked, and her mother claimed that she was raped and she was killed, just like out of her Twin Peaks or something, when Laura Palmer's body was found by, the lake. It's crazy, but at the same time, the police's version was that, she was a guerrilla, they left a gun, they put a fake uniform on top of her and they left a gun next to her and said, no, they were cleansing. It was a guerrilla cleansing going on, and she was a guerrilla and she was killed on a crossfire. So these are called fake encounters, and you just don't know at which point whose truth to believe, but this is what the report said, and that's what one of the booklets in the book, one of the multi-layered books, sort of tells you her story and shows you at the same time of her being photographed as a normal girl in a studio by a local, in a studio that I just found abandoned with pictures. So it's just incredible to see sort of her as a normal girl, and then to imagine this sort of atrocity that's happened to her, and how the veracity of truth even in her story, and how you sort of present that, and I wasn't there, so I can't claim to say that this happened and that happened. All I know is that this is how truth is getting manipulated, and in a war zone, truth is the first casualty. So, how do you then go about telling that story where you both move the audience at the same time, feel connected to Makdam, but at the same time understand that this is a problem? We have to look beyond what news headlines and news reports say.
And in fact, within the Centralia book project, you interpolate, you add inserts, and you add overlays and underlays, to the extent that, unfortunately, the copy that is at the photographer's gallery keeps having little bits stolen out of it, because people find these inserts extremely attractive.
Yeah.
I think that's a compliment. I really do. I think it's very irritating, but I think it's a compliment. Let's move on now, because I'm interested in this description of you that keeps recurring, which is the idea of being a transmedia activist. What does that mean to you, being transmedia?
I think it's just a term coined for people who kind of work in different multiple mediums, so I am pretty fluid with my practice. The basis of my work is photography, but my practice is quite fluid. It moves between film, animation. I'm working on a graphic novel, and photo books and installation at the same time. So it's quite fluid, and I guess each story has multiple forms. It's presented in multiple forms, so each form brings in different audiences. So I suppose that way transmedia is a term that's largely used. All terms are bastardized, even photography as a term is bastardized. So I don't even believe in anything, but at the same time, I guess it's closest to sort of describing my practice. But at the same time, my practice is also intersectional, and it is also interdisciplinary, so there are all these sort of terms. I mean, it's just easier to say I'm an artist and an activist.
But I also like the way that you dissolve boundaries between art and activism, and you mix in mention of intersectionality when we're talking about aesthetics. So it really is a kind of holistic practice. How do you think that art can be used for social change? Are there ways to go about it, ways to avoid it?
See, I'm a post-colonial artist, right? Like I didn't grow up with the desire to travel and parachute myself into Africa and other places, because I grew up in India with an Indian passport. These were never even
You're living
me.
it.
Yeah.
You're living it,
So
Poulomi.
for me, it was like very important to have some sort of a responsibility towards the community in which you're working, to sort of activate the community into to understand and empower them and give them understand their own agency, and to give them that agency to reclaim their own narratives and be able to tell their story on an equal platform as me as an artist. Because I might be Indian, I might be Bengali, something I'm close to the Maoist Naxalite movement, but at the same time, I come from a position of power and privilege, I mean, however, I might see myself as underprivileged or whatever, but it's nothing compared to the indigenous community, So for me, it's very important that you dismantle that sort of power privilege that you bring in as an outsider or as an artist, and allow those people who are the insiders of the community to take over the platform and have the agency to tell their own stories. And Centralia is really that. It's an amalgamation of my voice and their voices, a multiplicity. So I feel like for me, my practice likes to form coalitions, so I've always been interested in wider issues, rather than looking through the small lens of, oh, this is so precious an object, like this, this photography being this precious thing. For me, it's always been about something bigger. And it's really important that you as an artist be mindful and find ways to protest more, to collectivize, to form those coalitions, which can really impact and push your work to make for bigger changes, and not be complacent, not make art that is complacent, know at the time you're living know the politics that's going on and what is your role within that, and how can you really amplify it and stand behind what you're doing.
Without wanting to be precious, as you say, I still want to talk about the beautiful aesthetics of these particular images. I don't want people to just buy Centralia and read it like a newspaper report to find out
it's not a newspaper report,
about the issue. So I want to give you some compliments. So, I mean, despite portraying violence and abuse in daily life, particular to this conflict, your images actually also reminded me of classical Chinese and Japanese landscape painting, specifically of the sort of 18th, 19th centuries. And in visual terms, despite the story they tell, they are subtle, they're elegant, they're nuanced. The palette itself it's not muted, but it's subtle gradations. So it almost looks like a painting until you realize that it's a photographic image. What are your artistic influences? And do you value beauty, surface beauty in your images?
I think a great image needs to have some kind of tension. You know, it needs to be both beautiful and violent. It needs to have the horror and the splendor. It needs to have the lightness and the darkness, the yin and the yang, you know. So for me, those are the things that attract me to an image. A very special image is something that has that tension to it, you know. And I mean, a lot of my artistic influences, I would say, I mean, I didn't come from any background in art. Like my parents didn't even complete school. So, I mean, but I mean, I grew up watching a lot of cinema. So a lot of my cinematic influences were the magical realist films of Satyajit Ray or Japanese Kurosawa and many other filmmakers, you know. And I'm just, for the landscape, I mean, we live in a beautiful world, you know, and to see that being damaged and damned is just such a painful thing for me itself, you know, that I feel like I am drawn to those contradictions, and I like to present them, you know, but also it's my love for that land, you know, that probably ends up showing the beauty. And I mean, I don't really only ever had 3 lenses in my life throughout my career as a photographer. So I always stick to the same lenses, and I largely shoot on film. And yeah, I mean, it's just trying to let the audience feel again and again, who are looking at my work, that Earth is beautiful and this is what's being done to it, and we have to wake up. Yeah.
I have a very specific aesthetic question to ask you, because I noticed it as a theme throughout Centralia and your other work. What's the significance of darkness and the nighttime in your imagery? The most striking images, even whether they have people in them or no people at all, they're just landscape, actually seem to have been taken at midnight. What does the darkness reveal to you?
Well, the darkness reveals to me both the magic and the mania. So for me, I feel all creatures of darkness make the world more fascinating and make these places oddly revealing, you know. And I'm largely extremely interested by the way how this violence lurks under the surface in the darkness, you know, that you might, like, that is something very interesting to me. And I'm obviously very inspired by Lynchian dream narratives, and sort of use again these sort of surrealist dream narratives and see how they sort of align with these mania and these madness. You have people dancing in a rave at the same time. You have like bodies burnt and like thrown along the side. All of this is happening. The earth is burning in the darkness, you know. All of this is happening around the same place in like this nighttime. So it's both alluring and scary, and at the same time it's like oddly revealing, you know. So it's again about the violence that lurks under the surface, you know. So I think a lot of Centralia is about that. It's basically a nightmare tale. So I think that's why a lot of the, you know, the sort of dream narratives and the night comes into
but it's a subtle lurking nightmare.
Yes,
you know,
there's a build to it in the book and in the film. Like, you build towards a climax and then you go boom, you know. But you know, you kind of, yeah.
I want to mention this film as well. And you also mentioned the idea of the earth burning, because both within Centralia and the film that's connected to Centralia, so there's a beautiful around 15 minute
yeah.
film. I saw it on Vimeo. I think if you search for it online, it will come up.
It won't, it's just playing at the gallery.
Okay, it's playing as part of the Centralia exhibition. Thanks for that clarification. The striking images within the film in particular do have an ecological message. They are images of the burning of the earth, spontaneously burning, sort of burning alone at night. I wondered if you could say a little bit more about those.
Yeah, so the film really is a science fiction shot of a very real global ecocide. And for me, genocide's always linked with ecocides, especially where I have worked at least. And it was very important for me to link the two and to show how ecocides are happening. It has arrived, and it just questions the idea of that, how did humanity get here and where are we going to go from here, And the film is really meant to be a wake-up call for all those who are watching it, to see that this is our future, and this is what the future is going to look like, and the only saviors of this planet are probably going to be women, and because the last survivor in the film is a woman, and it's like a searing warning of where we are headed as a global society. So that's what it is. Centralia is that. And the film is basically an expansion of the book onto the walls. So for me, it's really important that a book is a book. When it comes onto the wall, it's something else, I don't like the idea of pasting pages of books onto the walls. For me, they are different. They do different things to you, So the film is a distillation of the book and the idea expanded, So yeah. So it's really about an ecocide, and the photos are about the genocide. So yeah.
On that cheery note, I just want to give everyone watching a heads up. In 15 minutes, we're going to be opening up to questions from the floor. Type them into the chat function. We're going to select the ones which we haven't covered because we want to broach as many topics and approaches as we possibly can. I will read them off my phone. Apologies if it looks like I'm playing with my phone in the middle of a public event. Let's get back to your work. All of your work, whether it's Centralia or it's work that you've done around menstruation, stigma, or women soldiers, these are long-term, deep, rich projects which involve a lot of the human dimension, not just about you stepping in and taking some photographs. What do they demand of you beyond your aesthetic sense? What do they demand of you as a person, as a psychologist, as a sociologist?
I think again, coming back to I think you encounter a lot of social forces when you're in these spaces and you're working. Some of them work in your favor, some of them work against you. So it's really how you navigate through those forces and people and how you tell those stories. For me, the central, most important dimension of all my work is agency, and how I give agency to the people in my work. So that is my most important part of my work. And that's how I have long-term, that's how I've reinvented my practice long-term. That's how I want to move. And it's extremely important for me that the people who are represented in my work in some way reclaim their narratives and are able to share their voice and their opinions as well. They're all long-term bodies of work, so they require a lot of engagement and motivation that lasts for a long time, but also belief. In its central most idea is believing in your values and what keeps motivating and the greater purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, surely that has to be more than photography, because without that belief, your work is over, because that's just what carries me forward. Yeah.
I am picking up on this reference to photography, which you say more than just photography, but I did want to point out and ask you about the range of aesthetic approaches you take within photography, because looking across your entire body of work, you balance out very set back landscape imagery with posed portraits, with documentary and reportage. So you're speaking multiple aesthetic languages.
My practice is quite fluid, as I said. That's why it's also contentious and controversial, because
say a little bit more about that, please.
So a lot of journalists find it kind of daunting and doesn't fit into their rules. I kind of like to break rules. It's very important for me to know the rules, but it's important for me to break them as well. I am somebody who is sitting at the crossroads of, say, the future. I can be a futurist in a sense, because I like experimenting and working with mediums that look into the future and how you can push and push and push documentary to different avenues, and that that may or may not fit what people's expected ideas of ethics are, or way of telling stories are. So my practice is quite fluid. I do use journalism as a research tool, but I don't really call myself a journalist. It sits in the nexus of social justice, activism, art, and technology.
I mean, I see you as an artist, and you never claimed to be some sort of photojournalist who's acting as a rapporteur for The Hague or for international bodies. And shouldn't an artist be somewhat untrustworthy?
Yeah, totally. I think it's absolutely fine to offend people, have haters, have people who dislike you, not agree with you, but at the same time, you'll find people who will be provoked, who will align with you. So it's okay. I think it's absolutely fine, because once your work is out there in the world, you don't have control over it. So,
The BBC interviewed you as part of a feature on war reporters. I found that very striking, because that is not how I see you or war reportage. Do you think there's a way of actually expanding our understanding of what war reportage is to include work like yours?
Well, this idea of this war hero photographer is a very Western idea. I mean, it's an invention that we have to really match it up with the prevailing, news media coverage and all that. I don't really do that. For me, war begins at home. So, I'm a different kind of a war photographer. I've seen like the biggest battles people have fought behind closed doors. I mean, there's a war on women's bodies. I mean, Centralia is a story about indigenous women where, their territories and their bodies are aligned. The rape of the land is raping the bodies, and the rape of the body is raping the land. This is connected. This is the heart and the nexus of the work that people need to understand. For indigenous people, women, especially indigenous women, the land and the bodies are connected.
Yeah.
So whatever you do to the land, you're doing to the body, and what you're doing to the body, you're doing to the land.
And that's been the central principle of all mass rapes.
Exactly.
And
this is the only thing I wanted to focus on in my exhibition, amongst the bigger project of Centralia, that how women's bodies are related to this idea of land and what it means, for them. Because, when you have one room and one space, like what is it that you really want to tell? And, what is your message? And for me, I really wanted that to come through. And yeah.
I want to ask one further thing, really, which is about the role of text in your work. How do you use text? Is it to supplement the information, or is it to satirize? Because a lot of your text is very witty.
Yes.
And a lot of it can be read out. It can be performed like a play.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's such cynical journalism in there. It's absolutely brilliant. And my collaborator who did it, Anil, he's an absolutely brilliant journalist, local grassroots journalist. Yeah, so it's the text, again, as I said, it's used both to reveal, to illuminate, to question, to memorialize, to, satire, to critique. It's all of these things, and to add context over and above, So I kind of use it the same way, giving it that multiplicity that the photos do as well. So it's the same, yeah.
I wanted to remind our audience that even though we're speaking about extremely big issues, very serious issues, perhaps even depressing issues, depending on how you react, you might get angry, you might get energized. There is also an element of incredible positivity within your work, I feel, because you always stress community. And I feel, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that there is also a focus on how even in the darkest periods, people still celebrate.
Always.
They mourn. I wondered if you could say a bit more about that.
Life goes on, people know how to live in the hardest of circumstances. Like I've seen that, say, beginning in my home to outside. In all of the greatest difficult stories I've reported, I've always seen how people know how to still get up in the morning and get going, and it's really important to show those moments, to show how people know how to live, celebrate, even in their darkest moments, and for the longest time, I couldn't take this body of work out in the world because I just felt there was so much darkness. And I felt like until I can show how people live, dance, rave, there's this image of a tabernacle in my show. It's on the other side of the wall. It's a tabernacle, where it is a space of the spiritual worship where people are performing a rave outside it, and they're eunuchs, they're transvestites, they're local indigenous people, all kinds of people just coming together to like fervently beat the drums and celebrate. And it is like so beautiful and mesmerizing and scary at the same time, given that this is a completely militarized place, So for me, it's really important to show that people know how to dance and live in spite of the biggest, because that's human. That's what we are as human, that's our strength, that's our resilience. And if you can't show that, no matter how people are bent, they're broken, but they know how to pick themselves up and still go on. That resilience is kind of hallmark in most of my work. Is really, it can come across in the beginning as something that is very dark, but it really is about the resilience,
I don't get a sense of darkness from your work, precisely because the images have such aesthetic subtlety to them, and also because you interpolate everything with commentary, with satire, with multi-layered narratives. I just want to ask, because you mentioned resilience, we're having this conversation on Zoom in the middle of a global pandemic. How has the pandemic been for you as an artist? Have you been able to create? Have you been able to enjoy the success of Centralia?
No. Well, I have a disability, so I have very bad MDD and anxiety. So I kind of relapsed in the middle of the pandemic.
Could you just clarify what MDD is?
Sorry, MDD is major depressive disorder with anxiety disorder, and I'm also bipolar. Haha, that's great. But
you got the
and I have my periods today.
You got the hat trick.
Yeah.
But
so I relapsed, and it was really hard. So I had to rethink my practice completely. But at the same time, I feel like, I don't want to sound like a hippie, but I do feel that when you have some of these disabilities or mental crisis and illness, a third eye opens up in your here, and that is like the eye of perception. Somehow your perception grows and you evolve. You reach a space where you have this perspective that you didn't have before, and it is very important. So I think in that way, I feel I'm differently abled, and I've been able to rethink my practice. And this year has ended up being my most creative year ever in terms of making new work, which is going to be out next year in 2022, of something very special I'm working on. Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about that? Are you allowed to?
It's going to be an animation piece, completely hand painted and inside virtual reality, and it's going to be about a 21st century girl who turns into a superhero from the power she gets from menstruation and goes on adventures. So yeah,
that's completely brilliant. It's such a great idea. I now am afraid that people on the internet are going to steal it. I regret asking you what it's about.
Censor that.
But
it's out there, it's happening, it's out in the world.
It's copyrighted to Poulomi, by the way.
Yeah.
No one can steal it.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about fame, because in one sense, despite the terrible situation we're all going through, as a public artist, you're enjoying your most famous year, because Centralia has been hugely successful. It's been nominated for or won multiple international awards. Does this kind of profile sit well with you? Does it sit well with your activism?
It's a hard one, because even with Blood Speaks, I saw that the work ended up changing a law because it was so long term, and it criminalized the practice of menstrual exile, although I encountered so many difficulties along the way, but at the same time, I feel like laws, don't really change people's hearts and minds, and the problem persists, and more work needs to be done if you really want to see long-term sustenance. So I feel like I have so much more to do. There's so much more work to be done that I can't just get complacent here and think, oh, I've had a great show. I've been collected by a museum. Now what? My job is done. I've got to just move on to the next thing. That is not the way I think. I think I'm still going to continue working here. I'm going to be continuing telling stories here, and it's going to be maybe a much bigger body of work. Who knows? Eventually it will be, I'm pretty sure. But it's a lifelong commitment to a cause, So it's very hard to see them as coming to an end, because there is no end. There can be sequels and other things, if you think of it as a novel or a film. But, there is a lot of work to be done. And I mean, India is at crossroads. It's a really fascist country. There's
You've said
Modi.
you've said that twice now. What do you mean by that?
I mean, we have Modi, Bolsonaro, we had Trump. We have a lot of greenwashing going on.
You have Duterte or
we have citizens being taken off their citizenship rights. We are at this crossroad of a very, very deep crisis. The land's being excavated. People of the land are being killed, massacred, and it's not getting reported. So I think we're in a really dark place, and we've seen this sort of state violence has occurred all over the world. We've seen with BLM this sort of police brutality. So the same thing is happening in Centralia. It is police brutality, So this is not something about India. I mean, I think that's what Ghost Dance, the film, puts in context, that this is a global issue. This has happened in the past. It's happening now, and it's going to get worse. So what are you going to do about it?
That's a great challenge. In just 5 minutes, we're going to open up to questions from the floor. I can feel my phone vibrating against my leg, which means that the people who are present with us this evening do indeed have many questions for us. We are coming to the close of our part of the conversation, but I'm very aware that you are part of the Deutsche Börse Photography Prize class of 2021 in company with other artists, and some of the artists on the shortlist speak to each other in terms of their work, and some are more distant from each other. What I hear from you as an artist and an activist is a real sense of mission and of direction and intentionality. How do you feel towards other creators of your work generation? Do you feel that you're part of an artistic community, or do you feel you're out there by yourself?
I think as an artist of color, I'm at a very important part at an important time in the art world, or this industry. And I think there hasn't been a better time than now. And I feel it's really important. It's an important year because all the 4 shortlists who have been represented are all artists of color. So I think I take great pride in sharing my exhibition with all 3 other artists who are exceptional and have great minds and are all interdisciplinary artists mostly, at least Zeneb and Chaufei. And I just feel so, so proud to be in a space sharing the room with them at a time where the world is changing, the times are changing, and we know as Black and brown artists how much we've had to struggle just because of the skin color we have and how many obstacles and barriers we faced to come this far, So I feel it's a good time, I feel it's a good time for us, and we have to get our voices out there more. We need to be heard more, and we need our space. And if no one's going to make space for us on a table, we have to build our own table,
That is such an inspiring moment. You're going to have to forgive me while I now act as if I'm on the tube sitting opposite you looking at my phone.
Yeah.
Because we have lots and lots of questions coming in. I hate that I'm looking at things on my phone, but here we go. Anonymous question from the chat. So thank you, Anon. There's wonderful poetry and prose in Centralia as well. Can you talk about the superb text excerpted by Ivan Segal at the end of the book? How did this text come to be?
Yeah, so Ivan is a Renaissance man, I would say. He's an incredible genius. And we were interested in, again, blood minerals and network data and how that sort of sits together. And I wanted Ivan, he's an incredible man, and he's someone who has set up radio stations in Balochistan, which is similar conflict is going on. He's set up things in Brazil, in the Amazon. So I just felt like Ivan is a great person to put this in a global context and write something about it. I struggled. I thought a lot about it. Should it be a woman? Should it be another indigenous person? But I said, no, sometimes it's really about the people who are doing the real work on ground. It's great to have him come on board and sort of put it in this sort of global context,
And did you communicate with him about what Centralia was?
Oh, totally. I mean, totally. We're completely aligned. He believes in the project. He's a great photographer himself, and he made a book with Tidal a few years ago. And he's a great practitioner, and he's still very much working. But he runs the global the Global Voices, I think it's called. It's a human rights, intersection of human rights, journalism,
Thank you.
community. So he's worked in Sri Lanka, he's worked in Jaffna in Sri Lanka, he's worked in Balochistan, he's been everywhere, he's incredible. So yeah.
Thank you for that question. Ivan, I hope that wasn't you coming in as a non. I'm sure it wasn't, by the way. Another question. Can you talk about, a wonderful question. Can you talk about your relationship to institutions? You mentioned that you're a post-colonial artist. How does that impact on how you work? So really it's about your relationship.
I have to say I've had lots of difficult, tough relationships with institutions, because institutions of the Western world often have this perceived cultural superiority and often appropriate a lot of the works we do and try to tell works, whether there's a publication, Western publication platform or an institution or any of those things. So I've always struggled with the fact that they always have this sort of cultural superiority, and how by having that, how they are sometimes without thinking, end up reaffirming the values of, say, patriarchy or racism. And so I've always had a tension, love and hate relationship with institutions, and a lot of change need to happen. I think a lot of work is happening already in spaces, but you need to decolonize spaces more. You need to shift it up. You need to bring younger people up more. I really feel like that, again, as I said, this is a good time. This is a good time to shake things up.
I wanted to pick you up on that last comment you made before we opened up to questions, though. It's precisely related to this question. You don't feel that a lot of the so-called, let's be inclusive, blah, 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 is actually cynical, is actually patronizing, is actually opportunistic, that we're flavor of the month in 2021?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of token representation that's going on. That's something I felt was happening a lot in the beginning. I felt like some of the spaces, especially in the photojournalism world where I was in that space, I felt like I was always being picked because I was the next brown thing, And you need to be careful about that. You need to be represented in the right place, in the right context, because of your talent as well, not just because of your skin color,
And you wanted to be,
it's a real engagement. Sorry. You need to engage with artists of color and Black artists, engage in their history of struggle and their resistance, truly, truly, deeply engage and stand by them. And that duty to care and responsibility is really important. You just don't give shows and you just don't publish their work and forget about it. You take one step more, It's really important, because if you really have to dismantle white supremacy and show care, then you have to work really, really hard, and we shouldn't be the ones telling you how to do that hard work.
And to work in good faith to enable artists to create a body of work throughout their lives, not just to be part of the hot show of 2022.
No, not at all. No.
There's been a wonderful question about the technical aspects, which I really love, from Fee Robson. Poulomi talks about shooting on film. Is there a preference for film types or speeds? Also, is there an appetite for exploring other conflicts? Let's talk about the film question first.
Okay, so no, I have no, I just have an old Hasselblad, but I also use a Holga. So I like to change different cameras, as we've discussed before, where you said I have an eclectic approach. Yes. It's quite a postmodernist approach. I kind of like to mix things up and experiment a lot. I use multiple exposures a lot in my work, and those are all shot in like simple Lomo Holgas, like plastic boxes, Yeah, so really, I have never given importance to equipment. As I said, I have a Hasselblad, but I've only ever had one digital camera with 3 lenses all my life. And they're manual lenses, and just like a Holga, I just keep it really light. When you're going into communities, you don't want to look like the macho war photographer who's turned up with his cargo pants and his cargo jackets and with Leica slinging down. No, I'm none of that.
I'm imagining the khaki waistcoat that has like 20 sort of...
Exactly.
But they're like bullet casings, but they're actually for film.
No, I dress like a I'm none of that. I'm very small. I'm very like, I usually just carry one camera and one backup camera or something.
You don't fetishize the technical
I'm not
aspects.
interested. No, I love the Hasselblad because it's a medium format camera. You kind of bow down and people you're working with also get to see what you're looking at. So it's kind of magic in there, you know, when they get to see their own community through. So they get to get a taste of how you're seeing it, you know, and that brings them together. According to some of the guerrillas I met, they thought I was some kind of a machine woman or something. Like they were flinging these AK-47s and I had this Hasselblad tapping my film and moving my backs and doing this, and they were like, what are you doing? Who are you? Like,
What is this weapon
I've never
you have?
seen anything like that before. So they were as intrigued by me as I was by them. So, I mean, that I think was our common ground.
These questions are fantastic. Please don't be shy. We have about 10 minutes left. I have lots of further questions, but do keep them coming because I think these are great questions. Fee had a follow-up question, which was actually about further projects. Do you have an interest in documenting other conflicts? What's on your list?
I don't really think like that.
Tick this one off, go over here.
I'm more interested in depth rather than running around too many places. I'm more interested in going deeper into stories rather than running from places to places. I love India and its borders, and I've been exploring the borders for a while, and that's something I keep going back to. So it's a contested area as well. But no, I have never really felt the need to go into other countries and cover war unless it's an assignment. I'm more interested in the depths. If I get the depth to go into a space, and then I'm interested in it. And again, time, right? Like that kind of investment of time. So yeah, but I am interested in seeing how climate change and environmental justice impacts women. I'm very interested in eco-fascism and how, again, Black, Indigenous women and brown women sort of pay the price for climate change, and how they're all connected, and how feminism is connected to, again, coming back to intersectional ways of doing art. And I'm really interested in these issues, and if something with these issues take me into those areas, I probably will. But I don't have, like, I'm not going to Syria or anywhere.
I'm just going to check my phone one more time just to see what further questions have come in. There's a question from someone calling themselves Handsome Anonymous. Don't do that. The question says, do you have a ritual or a routine or specific practice when you photograph? Can you talk about what usually goes through your mind when photographing or looking to photograph? Good question.
Well, I think as a photographer, you kind of walk towards an image. You find a situation that you engage, you like the vibe, and you just like carry on there, and you just hang around there, and then the magic starts happening, you know? Then all the different elements kind of comes together, and the universe just connects, and you get that picture. And that is really a moment of an antidepressant, you know? There is a real magic when you get that photograph, and you know, it is so deeply intuitive that it's very hard to say there's a ritual. There is no ritual, there is no formula. It's just a magic between the right light, the right moment, the right people, the right rhythm, the right things happening. You know, it's also it's as much internal as much as it is external. So it's both spiritual at the same time, it is quite external. So, you know, it's both these things. Your psyche is very much working together with what your eyes are doing. So I would say the right photograph comes at a point when your eyes and your heart and your feet are aligned, you know, and that's when the great image happens. And there is no formula for it, but it is quite magical when you get that. Yeah.
I want to make an armchair psychoanalytic point that you described yourself as a depressive about 10 minutes ago, and then you described that moment of taking a really great shot as an antidepressant. Is there something healing for you?
Therapeutic. Yeah, photography has known to be therapeutic for so many artists, you know. because it's a very meditative, it has a meditative quality, you know, when you're engaging and you stop breathing and you're focused on that moment, you know, you zero down to that moment of complete immersion, you know, and that focus is very meditative. And it's known that meditation is good for all of us on different ways, whether it's doing house calls or hoovering or taking a photograph or going for a run. They all do the same thing. So I think there is an element of therapy in photography, and so many artists have done great, beautiful projects around sort of self-discovery and families where they've used photography as a therapeutic tool. Yeah. And it still very much continues to be my therapy. I see art as therapy, in fact, and that's why maybe I continue to be an artist, because it is so deeply fulfilling. The act of creating is so fulfilling, you know, that it is the journey, not the end. It's the process that keeps you going rather than the outcome, you know. So yeah,
I'm just going to give a pause because I love what you just said, but we do have 5 minutes left and we have further questions coming in. Okay, I just want to check that we've covered all this ground. My final question really is about the here and now and where we're sitting. We are at the Photographers Gallery. This isn't the Deutsche Börse Photography Prize that we wanted to have. We wanted to fill the room with people and have a party and celebration and lift our glasses up to you and towards the other nominated artists. But I wondered if you could say a little bit about the staging. How did you want the Centralia show to look and to feel? This isn't the cold white gallery box, is it? What is it then?
Yeah. So I mean, the space is quite immersive. I wanted it to be immersive. All my work is quite immersive. I wanted to evoke an atmosphere of mystery and eeriness in the space. So that's why we chose darker wall colors. And because a lot of the work has been taken at night times, there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of lights, there's a lot of shimmer and shine and allure, and all of this felt like jumped out really well in the blue walls, you know. And at the same time, where you see land, and when you see people mourn that land, and it goes into another color, which is gray. And then we have the film, and the surround soundscape is from the film that's playing throughout the show. I mean, in an ideal space, the film would be in another room, but since we don't have that, we have it in the same room. But I still think it beautifully works. The sound beautifully works with the photos, and they evoke a sense of mystery, a sense of uncomfortableness, that you've just walked into a space which is not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be, you're probably going to be a changed person once you walk away from that space. Just like the book, when you touch the book, it's rough and it gives you a hint of what kind of journey you're about to take. We kind of wanted to evoke that same atmosphere onto the walls and make it not necessarily very pleasant, but also elevating at the same time. So again, playing with the horror and the splendor, you know, both the element, the tension. Yeah.
I think you do that really beautifully, and that the darkness is mysterious, but it's also comforting. So it enables you to then go through the journey. We are going to close, so I'm going to slowly wrap up. I think I want to say thank you, Poulomi Basu, for your time, your attention, your thoughtfulness in answering my questions. And my next thing beyond the thanks for sticking with us is just congratulations on
the catalogue.
The catalogue of images. This beautiful book project, which is Centralia, which I'm trying to hold up.
This is the catalogue. The book is sealed in the show, so we can't show it. Yeah.
But this is one of a key image from the Centralia book project, the collection, the exhibition, all of these multi-dimensional images, thoughts, texts, words that have gone into Centralia. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to everyone who's watching, those were wonderful questions, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Just to echo Bidisha's words, thank you again for joining us, especially to our two speakers tonight, Poulomi Basu and Bidisha, and to my colleagues, especially George Ase Prempe, Jason Welling, Kate Welby, and Janice McLaren for the support in preparing for tonight, and to the Deutsche Börse Photography Foundation. And lastly, to you for your ongoing commitment to the gallery. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you. And We are grateful to be welcomed into your homes and to have the opportunity to share the beautiful and important work of Poulomi Basu. Anyway, I hope you're all okay. Please keep checking our website for updates on forthcoming events and follow the conversation over social media by using hashtag DBPFP21. Our next talk in this series is with Saufe on Tuesday, the 7th of September. So keep checking our website, and thank you again, and see you all soon. Have a good evening or a good day, depending on where you're calling from. Bye, everyone.